never made it, but I know what it takes. I'm motivated by a mix of emotion. Got my statement, and I'm reading it slow so I can understand it fully. Appreciate my standing, go out of this world and right on time. Oh, never in my life have I seen the sky light up like this. I'm far away from Earth and I wanna know if you exist. Mission control, do you read me? Send me my coordinates lately. Mission control, am I drifting? Tie me to someone who will love me, yeah. Wait, I think I'll last a bit longer. Fine.
Welcome everyone. Welcome everyone. Welcome everyone to another Ref Brandon and the Todd family YouTube video. Wherever you are, whatever you may be doing, thank you so much for making Ref Brandon and the Todd family part of your day. We always greatly appreciate it. Hopefully everybody enjoyed that extra hour of sleep you got last night. So hopefully you went to bed before the time actually changed. I tell you, as long as I've been alive in all my whole-born days, I've never figured out why the time changes in the middle of the night, because everybody pretty much is asleep when it changes. So you either do it before you go to bed, when you get up, or you get up in the middle of the night just to do it. It should change at 9 o'clock at night, or 10 o'clock at night, or 7 o'clock in the morning when people are actually up. Never made any sense to me, but oh well, doesn't matter, because the time changing at all in the first place doesn't make sense. To me, I've always said that people in the Eastern time zone, time should go back an hour and a half, and people on Pacific time, the time should go up an hour and a half, and then all 50 states should be in the same time zone all the time. That's just my personal opinion. But if you have any early thoughts on WWE's Crown Jewel from yesterday, please feel free to let me know. Of course, we'll talk about that coming up sometime later on in the week. Before today, I want to talk about some of the games from yesterday in the world of college football. As always, for all you night owls, I will not mention any of the 10 o'clock or 10:30 football games in case you have not watched them yet. I have a feeling, since time changed last night and everybody got an extra hour of sleep, that a lot of folks may have stayed up and watched some of those games. Let's go back to Friday night to begin with, because Boston College became bowl eligible by defeating Syracuse 17-10. And if memory serves, Boston College actually started out 1-3. I'm pretty sure they did, which means they've won 5 games in a row. So they've got a chance to have a 7 or 8 win season. And for Boston College, that's a pretty good football season. Now on to yesterday. Ohio State defeated Rutgers 35-16. I tell you what, the Ohio State defense is for real. I honestly don't know if anybody is going to score more than 30 points on them this year. But their offense is funny because they've still got playmakers all over the field. And if you watch them, they just don't move the football. But if you look at the stats, they're not bad. I mean, they usually, not always, but usually have a pretty good amount of total yards. Their passing game is fine. They don't turn the ball over. they just don't score. So it's kind of hard to figure out exactly what's going on with their offense. But as long as their defense is legit like it is now, they don't need to have no 50-point games this year like they did last year. It's just hard to believe you can move the ball with ease and not have a lot of turnovers, not have a lot of penalties, but just not score. Clemson defeats Notre Dame by the score of 31-23, and they only had 285 total yards, which, if I'm not mistaken, is fewer yards than they've had in any loss this year. But of course, nobody will talk about it because the only thing that matters is the final score, and they won. But after yesterday's game, it should be obvious that Phil Mafah should be the starting running back. Will Shipley was out because he suffered a concussion in the game last week, so he was out due to safety protocol. But Phil Mafah had 36 carries, which is way more than anybody's had in a game this year. 186 yards, so he averaged over 5 yards a carry, but I think he only had 3 carries that went for 1 yard or less, whereas Shipley, half his carries this year have gone for 1 yard or less. But Mafah did fumble late in the game when Clemson was trying to put the game away, which might explain why Shipley is the starting running back, because Mafah does have fumbling issues, but no doubt he is the better of the two running backs as far as just running the ball. He just has fumbling issues, and he's not a very good pass blocker, but just put him in the backfield and give the man the football. So Clemson, for the first time in a while, first time this year, I believe, at least against a Power 5 opponent, that they actually won the turnover battle. That's been their biggest issue all year long. In years past, Clemson would turn the ball over 2 to 3 times a game, but they would force 2 to 3 turnovers a game, so it was okay. Well, this year, they turned the ball over twice, but they don't force any. Yesterday, they had 2 turnovers, but they forced 3. And Dabo has said all year long their biggest issue is the turnover margin. And for a while, yesterday, I thought, man, they're going to go the whole game without turning the ball over. That didn't happen, but they forced 3, so it was okay. Indiana defeats Wisconsin 20-14. Indiana, I believe, was on like a 5-game losing streak. I think that's their first conference win of the year. And I got to be honest, Wisconsin is still going to be fine long term because Luke Fickell is a great football coach. But I thought they'd be better in year 1 than they have been. Nebraska looked like they were turning their season around after benching turnover machine Jeff Sims and going with Harburg at quarterback. And then they go out yesterday and play Michigan State and get beat 20-17. In overtime, Texas defeats Kansas State 33-30. Texas actually up at one point, 27-7, and they let Kansas State score 20 in a row to tie the game at 27. But Texas does win in overtime. Ole Miss had to have a field goal missed at pretty much the end of regulation to beat Texas A&M 38-35. Now, Ole Miss plays Georgia next week. That's undoubtedly going to be the best offensive team that Georgia will play this year. So it wouldn't surprise me if Ole Miss plays Georgia and they put up 30 plus, 35 plus. But Ole Miss's defense is so bad, it wouldn't surprise me if Georgia puts up 45 or 50 plus. In a game that I said would actually be a tight game, and it was the battle of the chickens. And South Carolina Gamecocks do defeat the Jacksonville State Gamecocks at 38-28 final score. But that was a nail biter for a long, long time. And I knew it would be, but I knew South Carolina had enough depth to where they would win in the end. But I knew that Jacksonville State would hang with them, and I still say Rich Rodriguez will be back at the Power 5 level in a year or two. NC State defeats Miami 20-6, and the NC State fans still continue to say they have no offense, which they don't, but they have a legit defense. And Miami, I heard somebody the other day say that if Miami coach Mario Cristobal got measured on what he did as a head coach from January to August, he's probably top 3 or top 5 in college football. But if he gets measured on what he does from September to December, he's bottom 5. And I agree with that, because I've said here on the channel numerous times that Mario Cristobal is a heck of a recruiter. As the old saying goes, he could sell ice to an Eskimo as far as recruiting wise. He can just about get any player he wants. But on game day, the man is an absolute joke of a head coach. Kentucky defeats Mississippi State Bulldogs by the score of 24-3 in a game that I wasn't surprised the team won, but I was surprised it was this big of a margin. I thought the game would be closer than what it was. But West Virginia defeats BYU 37-7. Auburn over Vanderbilt 31-15. And I wonder how much longer Vanderbilt is going to wait until they put this coach on the hot seat. Vanderbilt's eventually going to find out that they're just Vanderbilt. It doesn't matter who their coach is, they're still Vanderbilt. And if they're going to win, they're going to have to give a coach 4 or 5 years to start winning, because they're just so bad. You're not going to come there in a year or two and turn things around. But they keep running off every coach they get, in my personal opinion, before they get a chance to turn it around. Houston defeated Baylor 25-24. Iowa defeats Northwestern by the score of 10-7. Iowa continues to have the worst offense in the history of mankind, and they still might win 10 games this year, maybe even 11 games. But they did announce earlier in the week that offensive coordinator Brian Ferentz would not return next year, which caught most folks by surprise, because since he is the son of head coach Kirk Ferentz, everybody thought that if Brian Ferentz was let go, Kirk would retire. But as of yet, he has not, and he said he plans on coaching as long as he loves the game. But you can't blame Iowa for making the decision, because there is just no reason why an offense should be this bad for 3 straight years. Illinois defeats Minnesota 27-26 in a high-scoring game where defense was optional. Memphis defeats South Florida 59-50. Georgia Tech upsets Virginia 45-17. I don't mean upset as in they upset them because Virginia's terrible. I mean upset as in it probably was expected to be a little bit closer than that, because Virginia has actually played a little bit better football in the last 3 or 4 weeks. But Georgia Tech now has 5 wins on the season, so they need one more win to be bowl eligible, and they've been so bad the last handful of years. That seems like a really good year for Georgia Tech. Tulane defeats East Carolina 13-10, and the reason why I bring that game up is because Tulane is ranked, so they have a chance to go to a New Year's Day bowl game again this year if they continue to win. Kansas defeats Iowa State 28-21, and I tell you, Kansas has turned things around so quickly. I don't know if their head coach, Lance Leipold, would leave, but I have a feeling that there's going to be quite a few openings in the offseason, and those teams are going to call Lance Leipold, and you can't blame them. In what appears to be the last Bedlam game for at least the foreseeable future, with Oklahoma leaving for the SEC, Oklahoma State defeats Oklahoma 27-24. And Brent Venables has to figure out how to cope with losing. If you recall, last year Oklahoma started out 5-0, and then once they lost that first game, that was it. And then this year, they started out 6-0 after that win over Texas, and then they played like an absolute hemorrhoid sandwich against Central Florida, but were lucky enough to still win the game to get to 7-0, and then they lose last week, and they lose this week. So it's like once Brent Venables loses, he just doesn't know how to get the team back on the same page. Alabama defeats LSU 42-28, and Milroe is actually making progress and getting better and better as the year goes on. He's still not an elite quarterback by any stretch of the imagination, but he's definitely a lot better now than he was in week 3 and week 4. Florida State defeats Pittsburgh 24-7, and this is by far the worst year Pittsburgh's had in a long time. Pat Narduzzi's typically usually good enough to at least get 6-7 wins out of his team. Not this year. Washington defeats USC 52-42, and I think after that game last night, we can officially safely say that unless USC makes a change at defensive coordinator, they're never going to be a threat to win a national title because they just continue to not even attempt to play defense. But I'm still not so sure they will because their DC sucks, and for some reason, he continues to suck. But Lincoln Riley seems like he's okay with it. And Georgia defeats Missouri 30-21. I got to give Missouri credit. I'm not 100% positive, but I'm almost positive they covered the spread. So they made it closer than the experts thought they would. And there was a time in that game where you thought, boy, this is going to be a close game down to the end. You never had the impression Missouri was going to win the game. At least I didn't. But I did think, this is going to be a pretty tight game up to the very, very end. And then finally, in the fourth quarter, Georgia pulls away with it. And in a mild upset, Arkansas defeats Florida 39-36. And I say mild upset because Arkansas's record was terrible. But if you have watched enough videos this year during college football season, you know that I just don't think Florida's very good. But I did think they would beat Arkansas. But since they're not any good, I'm not surprised by it. But it was funny because somebody did say that Arkansas continues to play hard for Sam Pittman, which tells me that people think he will be fired because you only use phrases like that when the head coach has either already been fired or about to be fired. So even though I've never heard an official word on that, when I was watching highlights of the game and they said, oh, Arkansas is playing hard for Sam Pittman. I thought, yeah, he's out the door. Any thoughts on any of this, please feel free to let me know. Homes for Our Troops is a publicly funded 501c nonprofit organization that builds and donates specially adapted custom homes nationwide for severely injured post 9/11 veterans. Since the 2004 inception, nearly 90 cents of every dollar spent has gone directly to our program services for veterans. Visit at hfusa.org. And in case you have not heard, Connor Stalions actually resigned from Michigan. I believe it was on Friday. It may have been Thursday, but I think it was Friday. He actually resigned. My guess is Michigan thinks that him resigning will keep them out of trouble since he is supposed to be the man behind all this. I just don't know if that's going to work or not, because the more details that come out about this, the guiltier they sound. And then Harbaugh, just not even talking about it, tells you he's guilty because he doesn't want to admit it, but he doesn't want to lie and say, nope, not true. So him just not talking about it pretty much tells you they're guilty. But they're idiots because they sent the Connor Stalions guy to a game featuring Central Michigan. And if you're Michigan and you've got to send somebody to steal signs from Central Michigan, then you're in bad shape. So why in the world they did that, knowing he's not going to be hidden quite as well in a game where there's going to be nobody there, and then he goes and brags about being there? That's just flat out ignorant. Don't understand that at all. So the more details that come out, the more I feel like after this year's over, Jim Harbaugh will be gone. And I don't know if the Big Ten will take Michigan out of the playoffs if they make it. I feel like they will, because if they don't and Michigan wins the whole thing, then 6 months from now, they're just going to strip them of the championship and we'll have no champion for this season. But since the investigation is still ongoing and they haven't came out and gave Michigan any kind of punishment, it's kind of hard to say you're going to punish somebody for something that they haven't been punished for yet. So I don't know how long the NCAA investigation will last, but my guess is if it ends in the next week or two, then you'll see the Big Ten take Michigan out of the playoffs so that they don't win the championship and then turn around and be stripped of it. And I think Jim Harbaugh will leave as soon as the year is over with. Let's go ahead and get our dad joke of the day in here. I once purchased a dog from a blacksmith. As soon as I brought him home, he made a bolt for the door. And that does it for today's Ref Brandon and the Todd Family YouTube video. Until next time, it's Ref Brandon saying, just like in pro wrestling, life can be over by the count of 3. Tell your friends and family how much you love them. Bye.